Okay, one more, yeah.
Is there an average age that a child knows that they're part of the LGBTQ?
Yeah, right, there's a lot of letters, yeah. Is there an average age? So I'm sure there's a statistic there on the average age, but clinically, what I see is that there are a couple of different groups. There are kids who tell me they've always known. They tell me, particularly transgender kids know as soon as they understand gender most of the time, okay? So little kids who are transgender will learn about gender when they're 3, and they'll say, no, 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 I'm not a girl. This is not correct. There's been some mistake. I'm a boy. And their parents will say, oh, that's so cute, you know. But they're not kidding, right? And so as soon as they understand what these terms mean, they object. Some kids who are gay will say they knew when they were in kindergarten, they knew when they were in 1st grade, they were very aware. Other kids will say, yeah, it snuck up on me. I had a patient who I'd seen for a long time, and I wondered if she was questioning, and I'd asked her, other people had asked her, and she said, she would often say things like, I don't think so, I don't know. And then she called me from college and said, Dr. Deuter, I think I'm gay. And she said, you know, I'd never had a relationship with a girl, and then I hooked up with a girl, and I think I'm gay. Who knew? And so, so it could be all the way to college before somebody maybe has enough dating experience or attraction experience to be certain, but there are some kids who know very young.
And if they know very young, at what age does it become harmful for them not being able to express that? Like,
Yeah.
when you start seeing those?
In general, it seems to be around middle school that it becomes harmful to not be able to be honest and open. And that's, if you look at brain development and skill development, you know, adolescence is when kids become more abstract. They can step back and think about the way they are or how they fit in society. And once kids really reach the point where they can sort of analyze how they fit in or don't fit in or how things work, that's really when it becomes an issue. So some of the kids who say, I knew I was gay in kindergarten, are actually more comfortable than the kids who are only figuring it out in middle school. Some of the kids who are figuring it out in middle school have been operating under the assumption, I mostly fit in this way. And then they encounter an attraction to, you know, a kid in class, and they say, uh-oh, if this ends up being my sexual attraction, my expression, then I'm not going to fit in anymore. And then there are spikes in anxiety and depression at that point. So these are good questions. Okay, we're going to have some more questions at the end, but I just wanted to give everybody a break from me talking at you. Okay, so the GLSEN studies, there are a lot of statistics, but I want to ask you all, as I talk about these statistics, to just take a moment and try to let these numbers soak in. Try to think about what these numbers mean in terms of proportions of the population. Okay, so they're little numbers. I underlined some things. I highlighted some things that I thought were important, and I want you to especially look at the numbers, okay? So, from the GLSEN National School Climate Survey, 57.6% of LGBTQ students felt unsafe at school. Right? Here's a survey. Fill it out in private. Are you gay? Are you straight? Are you white? Are you black? Are you Hispanic? Do you feel unsafe at school? 57.6% of kids who identified as LGBTQ felt unsafe at school. Just think about that for a minute. That's more kids in this group feel unsafe at school than feel safe at school. And that's a really big deal. That's terrible. Okay, because of their sexual orientation, their gender expression, okay? 31.8% of LGBTQ students missed at least one entire day of school in the past month. So not only are these kids not feeling safe, but as a result of not feeling safe, they miss school, which is a real problem for education. It's also a problem for connection, fitting in, resolving some of the social issues, getting support from your school counselor. All of these things are affected, right? 1/10, so 1 out of 10 missed 4 or more days in the past month. That's 1 day a week. And again, it's a sobering number. So if kids are LGBTQ, they're missing a day a week of school, 1 in 10, because they don't feel safe at school. Does anybody else find that striking? I mean, it's just horrifying to me that a kid can't go to school because they don't feel safe. All right? Over a third avoided gender-segregated spaces at school because they felt unsafe or uncomfortable, like locker rooms. So we do segregate kids by their gender, right? Boys go change in the boys' locker room. Boys go to the boys' bathroom. Girls go to the girls' bathroom, girls' locker room. So some of the kids, and I've heard this from kids, and again, this is more than a third, would say when it was time to change clothes, they would avoid the issue. They might not change for PE. They might go to PE in their regular school clothes, get in trouble, lose points, be sweaty when they return to school because they hadn't changed into gym clothes, specifically for the purpose of avoiding the locker room. And then avoiding the restroom, unless you have an alternative restroom, it's very, very hard then. What if you need to go to the restroom and there's not a restroom you feel like you can use? And then most, 71%, avoided extracurricular activities. So you have a group of kids who already are afraid they don't fit in, feel like they don't fit in, feel discriminated against, feel scared, and don't go to the school dance because they feel unsafe or feel uncomfortable. All right, 85.2% experienced harassment. And this was defined as direct remarks that were harassing toward the end. 85% of these kids felt like they were being verbally harassed. 27% were physically harassed, as defined as pushed or shoved within the past year. 13% were physically assaulted, kicked, injured with a weapon. And so assaulted, not threatened, actually assaulted, 13%. 48.6% experienced electronic harassment, otherwise known as cyberbullying. So that's nearly half of these kids are going home. And I particularly, I think this is a very concerning thing, because let's say a kid, they go to school, right? They have to go to school. They're going to be truant. They're going to get in trouble. So they have to go. They don't feel safe all day long. They're in a heightened state of alertness. They don't go to the bathroom. They don't dress out for PE. They're failing PE. They're overwhelmed. They don't think they can talk to their school counselor. She's not going to understand. They don't feel like they can tell anybody. Kid goes home and says, finally, I can have a break from all of this. Gets on Instagram, and somebody says, you know, you're an effing tranny, right? And then they sit there at their dinner table, maybe with their loving family, maybe not, and have this additional harassment that's carried over to home. And this is one of the really concerning things about cyberbullying in all of our kids, but especially kids who feel marginalized and isolated. 59.6% of LGBTQ students were sexually harassed, meaning touched or having unwanted remarks. And I think part of the reason for that is that because their sexuality comes to the forefront, even for the therapist or the doctor, it's the only thing they can think about, talk about, focus on, then people think it's funny to grab or grope or say, do you like that? And this is the kind of stuff that goes on at school. 57.6% of students were harassed or assaulted and didn't report it. The 57% of the ones who were harassed didn't tell anybody. And 63.5% who did report said that the school did not do anything to help them. 98.1%, that's almost everybody, heard the word gay used in a negative way. That's so gay at school. 67% heard those remarks frequently or often, and 93.4% felt distressed. 95.8% heard other types of homophobic remarks, and 95% heard other negative remarks about gender expression. And again, often, 62.9% heard them often. Specific remarks about transgender people, like tranny or he, she. But this is the one that bothers me the most of all of these statistics. This one right here. 56.2% of students reported hearing homophobic remarks from their teachers or their school staff. So I think we all want to think that it's just the kids, but in a private survey, our kids are telling us that it's the adults in charge who are making these remarks as well. And this is nationwide. This is not one pocket in a small community somewhere. This is nationwide. And again, 63.5% had heard negative remarks about gender expression here, you know, tranny, he, she, stuff like that. So an even higher number had heard things like that. Okay, so now I'm going to go to some of the more highlighted ones because there are so many statistics. But I do hope everybody's taking a moment to try to think about what these numbers mean. Okay. 16.7% of students were prohibited from writing about or discussing LGBT topics in school assignments, right? So let's say your assignment coming back to school is, what did you do on your summer vacation? And you spent your summer vacation at the beach with your family, and you met somebody, and you fell in love for the first time in your life. And if that person is of the same gender as you, you can't write that in your English paper. You're not allowed. If that person is of the opposite gender, you're allowed to write that paper. That's acceptable. 15.6% were prevented from attending a school function or a dance with someone of the same gender. So if somebody said, you know, I'm going to take, you know, my significant other or somebody I like, and they happen to be of the same gender as me, they were told by their school that they were not allowed to do that. And 14.1% of students were restricted from forming a GSA, which is either a gay student alliance or gay straight alliance. And the whole issue of a GSA we're going to talk a little more about is so helpful to these kids. So there are kids who maybe know, maybe they don't know, maybe they intuit. If we had a GSA at my school, I would feel more connected. I would feel better here. They went to their administration and said, I'd like to start this organization. And 14% of the time they were told that they were not allowed to do that. 13% were prohibited from wearing clothing supporting LGBT issues. And so, you know, I imagine like just even like a pride flag, a rainbow. Like what are you preventing kids from wearing there? 10% prevented or discouraged from participating in sports. All right. And of course, it's not surprising and been a topic of discussion that so many kids, most of the kids who are transgender, were prevented from using their preferred pronoun and prevented from using the name that they preferred. LGBTQ students who experience higher levels of victimization were more than 3 times as likely to have missed school. So we said these kids were missing school. Rates of missing school are even higher if there has been an experience of direct discrimination. Have lower GPAs. This makes sense if you're missing school, if you're depressed, if you can't get the help you need, if you feel alone and isolated. Twice as likely to report that they didn't plan to go to college or trade school. Had lower self-esteem and school belonging and higher rates of depression. So I think a picture starts to emerge when the question comes up, why do we need to talk about this topic? And why are the rates of mental health conditions in these kids so high? I think we begin to see the answer as we look at these statistics and what's gone on in the lives of these children. All right? 42.5% of LGBTQ students said that they did not plan to finish high school. The ones who did indicated that they were considering dropping out because of harassment. So, and again, from a public health perspective, it's better for the health of our population and for all of us if our fellows do well, right? Our peers, our neighbors. It's better for all of us, and this is a real burden for all of us. We need to be worried about this even if we aren't directly working with these kids. All right, so gay-straight alliances. This is the second really, really important thing that I want you to commit to memory. Gay-straight alliances make a big difference for LGBTQ kids. So a little over half of students said their school had a GSA, okay? And most students participated, but 34% had not participated in the GSA. Students who had a GSA in their school were less likely to hear gay used in a negative way. Anybody have any opinions about why that might be? Education? Yeah, I read that. Awareness, yeah. Because I suspect, and so my kids are very accepting, very kind to all groups of kids, and all three of my kids are teenagers now. So somebody say a little prayer for me. And they have said that they hear these terms thrown around, and when and if they say, don't use that word, don't just call people gay, that's hurtful to gay people, their friends say, I don't know any gay people. And so I think maybe that's part of it. If your school develops a GSA, even if they never talk to the student body, knowing that the student body has a GSA alerts adults and kids to the fact that there are kids who belong to a GSA in our school, and shifts their behavior from, oh, you and I, we're just the same over here and we're talking about this and it's just a joke, to, oh, this actually may affect somebody in our community and I'd never thought about that. Yeah. They were less likely to hear homophobic remarks like fag or dyke, 51 versus 68%, so a 17% drop. Less likely to hear negative remarks about gender expression, more likely to report that school personnel had intervened when they heard homophobic remarks. And again, I think this is an issue of being aware that this is actually important to some of our kids, whereas some of the adults maybe have never considered that this is actually a matter of importance for their student population. They were less likely to feel unsafe, and they experienced lower levels of victimization and felt more connected at school. So I would submit to you that maybe one of the most helpful things, because we can't necessarily, one-on-one maybe we can, but as a community of professionals who care about the well-being of kids, we can't necessarily convince all of their parents and their grandparents and their aunts and uncles and cousins to act differently, to accept them, to love them differently. But we can advocate for all our kids to have a GSA in their school. We can do that. And I think if you look at these improvements in the quality of school conditions, it's a really important thing that we do. And I think another thing that's really important is if you look at all this information here, it doesn't say that things improve when the gay-straight alliance is very active. It doesn't say that things improve with a certain kind of education. It's the mere presence of the organization, starting a GSA, having that club at the school makes a difference for these kids.